Parliament. A. Meaning of Parliament. The term Parliament refers to a supreme legislative body in a country, typically composed of elected representatives, who have the authority to make, amend, and repeal laws. The structure, functions, and powers of a parliament can vary significantly, depending on the country's specific form of government and constitution. Here are some key aspects that generally define a parliament. 1. Legislative role. The primary function of a parliament is legislative. This includes the drafting, discussion, modification, and voting on proposed laws bills. Parliaments may also have the authority to ratify treaties, approve budgets, and set taxes. 2. Representation. Parliament serves as a representative body that reflects the electoral will of the population. It is typically composed of members who are elected by the public through various electoral systems. These representatives are responsible for expressing the interests and concerns of their constituents within the parliamentary setting. 3. Oversight. Another critical function of Parliament is to oversee the executive branch of government. This includes monitoring and scrutinizing government actions, policies, and spending. Parliaments often exercise this function through inquiries, debates, and hearings, and they may have the power to summon government officials for questioning. 4. Systems of Parliament. There are generally two main types of parliamentary systems. Unicameral, a single legislative chamber makes up the parliament. Examples include the parliaments of Finland and New Zealand. Bicameral, the parliament consists of two separate chambers or houses. Typically, these are called the lower house, often the House of Representatives or similar, and the upper house, such as the Senate or House of Lords. Examples include the United States Congress, House of Representatives and Senate, and the UK Parliament, House of Commons and House of Lords. 5. Functions and powers. Parliaments often have a range of additional powers and functions, including amending the Constitution. In many countries, parliaments have the authority to propose and pass amendments to the Constitution. Declaration of war. Parliaments may have the power to declare war or authorize military actions. Impeachment. In some systems, the parliament has the authority to impeach high-ranking officials, including the president or prime minister, for misconduct or crimes. 6. Democratic legitimacy. As an elected body, Parliament is a cornerstone of democratic legitimacy. It provides a mechanism for the public to influence government through their elected representatives, ensuring that the government remains accountable to the people. The term Parliament itself derives from the French word parler, which means to speak, highlighting the Parliament's role as a deliberative assembly, where governance issues are discussed and debated. This role underscores the importance of dialogue, debate, and consensus in democratic governance. B. Types of Parliament. Parliaments around the world vary in structure and function, reflecting the diverse political systems and historical contexts in which they operate. Broadly speaking, parliaments can be categorized based on the number of chambers they include. Here are the main types of parliamentary structures. 1. Unicameral Parliament. A unicameral parliament consists of a single legislative body or chamber. This simplifies the legislative process as there's only one chamber that drafts, debates, amends, and approves legislation. Unicameral systems are often found in smaller countries, or those with more centralized forms of government, where a single chamber is deemed sufficient to represent the interests of the population. Advantages. Efficiency in lawmaking due to the absence of a need for concurrence between two chambers. Lower costs and less complexity in the legislative process. Greater transparency and straightforwardness in legislative responsibilities and accountability. Examples: Norway, Denmark, New Zealand, and many other countries have unicameral systems. 2. Bicameral Parliament. A bicameral parliament consists of two separate chambers, typically known as the lower house and the upper house. The lower house usually represents the population at large, often based on population-weighted constituencies, while the upper house might represent territorial divisions or serve as a review body, with perhaps a more specialized role. Advantages. Enhanced checks and balances. as legislation must be approved by two chambers with potentially different perspectives, representation of different interests e.g., one house representing the population, and the other representing regional or state governments, potential for more thorough debate and scrutiny of legislation. Examples: the United States Congress House of Representatives and Senate, the UK Parliament House of Commons and House of Lords, and the Indian Parliament Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha are notable examples of bicameral systems. 3. Tricameral Parliament. Tricameral parliaments are rare and involve three separate chambers. This structure was typically used to represent different classes or estates within society, such as the clergy, nobility, and commoners, in historical contexts. Example: South Africa during the apartheid era had a tricameral parliament designed to provide separate representation for whites, colorids, and Indians, but it excluded the majority black population. This system was dismantled in the early 1990s. 4. Supranational Parliament. This type of parliament governs over multiple sovereign states, forming part of a supranational union or federation. Such parliaments are not tied to a single nation-state, but rather represent the interests of a group of states or regions under a common governmental framework. Example: the European Parliament, which is part of the European Union, represents EU citizens and is directly elected by them. It works alongside the Council of the European Union and the European Commission in a complex legislative process, known as the ordinary legislative procedure. Each type of parliament has its specific roles and functions, designed to fit the constitutional and political context of the country or entity it serves. The choice between unicameral and bicameral systems often reflects a country's size, complexity, and the diversity of its population, while the existence of supranational parliaments reflects deeper integration between independent countries. C. Functions of Parliament. Parliaments serve as critical institutions in democratic systems, performing a variety of key functions that uphold the principles of governance, accountability, and representation. Here are some of the primary functions of Parliament. 1. Legislative function. The most fundamental role of a parliament is to legislate, i.e., to make, amend, and repeal laws. Parliaments debate proposed bills, amend them as necessary, and ultimately approve or reject them. This process involves scrutiny to ensure that laws are in the public interest and reflect the will of the electorate. 2. Representation. Parliaments represent the diverse views and interests of the population. Each member of Parliament MP represents a specific geographic area, or, in some proportional representation systems, a broader constituency. MPs bring the concerns and needs of their constituents to the national stage, advocating on their behalf. 3. Oversight and scrutiny. Parliaments oversee and scrutinize the actions of the government to ensure accountability. This function is carried out through various means, including parliamentary questions, debates, investigative committees, and audits. Oversight ensures that the executive branch acts within the law, implements policies effectively, and spends public funds responsibly. 4. Budget approval. Parliaments have the authority to review and approve the government's budget. This includes scrutinizing government expenditures and revenues, and ensuring that public funds are allocated and spent according to the priorities and needs of the country. This power is a crucial aspect of the financial accountability of the government. 5. Constituent services. MPs provide services to their constituents by addressing individual or community needs and concerns. This might involve helping constituents navigate government bureaucracy, addressing local issues, or facilitating public services. 6. Forum for debate. Parliament serves as the principal forum for public debate on political, economic, and social issues. Through discussions and debates, Parliament can influence public opinion and the national agenda. This function is vital for a healthy democracy, as it promotes transparency and allows for the public airing of views. 7. Ratifying treaties. In many countries, the Parliament has the power to ratify international treaties and agreements. This ensures that such agreements have democratic legitimacy and adhere to the nation's laws and interests. 8. Amending the Constitution. In systems where the Constitution can be amended, the Parliament often plays a key role in this process. Constitutional amendments usually require a higher level of consensus in Parliament than ordinary legislation, reflecting their importance and permanence. 9. Electoral functions. In some parliamentary systems, especially in parliamentary republics or constitutional monarchies, the parliament may also have the role of electing the president or the head of state, and in some cases, members of the judiciary or other key public officials. 10. Conflict resolution. Through debate and negotiation, parliaments can serve as platforms for conflict resolution between different political, ethnic, religious, or regional groups within the country, by providing a structured environment.
Healthcare, education, the environment, international aid, crime. Issues affecting all our lives are shaped and driven by Parliament. But how did it all begin? What does Parliament do all day, and how do you fit in? Parliament has evolved throughout its long history to become what it is today, changing over time to meet the needs of the people. Two key historical events began this process. In 1215, King John put his seal on Magna Carta and agreed to a list of 63 rules set out by a group of barons. This ensured for the first time that no one, not even the king, was above the law. 50 years later, Simon de Montfort, for the first time, invited representatives of the towns and shires to his 1265 Parliament. These events established the foundations for the representative democracy we have today, and from this point onwards, the power to make decisions for the nation passed over time from the monarch to Parliament. Let's take a closer look at the UK Parliament today. Parliament is made up of three parts: the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the monarch. The House of Commons is the elected chamber of Parliament. It debates big issues, proposes laws, amends existing ones, and challenges the government's work. There are 650 members of Parliament, or MPs, who each represent a constituency in the UK. They belong to either a political party or are independent, and are elected by constituents of the area they want to represent. The leader of the party that has the most MPs elected after a general election becomes the Prime Minister and heads up the government. They choose a cabinet made up of 20 senior ministers who coordinate each government department's work. Parties not in power are called the opposition. MPs from the opposition and government question the government on policy and proposed laws. The Speaker keeps the House in order by chairing these debates. The House of Lords is the second chamber and shares the making and shaping of laws with the House of Commons. It has around 800 members, and it's made up mostly of life peers, and also includes hereditary peers and bishops. Lords are selected for their knowledge and experience, and hold government to account by using their expertise to look at laws and issues in detail. The monarch's role is mainly ceremonial. They meet the Prime Minister once a week to hear what's going on in Parliament and formally agree every new law. But that's not all. There are also people working behind the scenes who support the work of Parliament: clerks, librarians, researchers, and many more. The government has been elected to run the country, and Parliament holds the government to account for us, the public. But how? Prime Minister's questions and ministerial questions give MPs and Lords the opportunity to challenge the government's policies. It's in these debates that they can share the views of their constituents and the public and how new policies may affect them. Another important way Parliament can scrutinise or look in detail at the work of government is through select committees. Select committees analyse and scrutinise policy. They're made up of either MPs, Lords, or a mixture of both. Together, committee members look at a particular subject and make recommendations on improvements. Witnesses with expertise in the area under scrutiny are called to give evidence, which is used to help shape the committee's inquiry. Members of the public, like you, with a view on the subject can also give evidence for consideration. At the end of an inquiry, a committee writes a report with recommendations that the government usually responds to within 60 days. Both houses in Parliament share responsibility for making and shaping laws. But where do laws come from in the first place? A bill is a proposal for a new law, or to change an existing law, and comes from lots of places, like governing and opposition parties, public inquiries, civil servants, or campaign groups. So how does an idea get turned into a law? Imagine the government wanted to place greater controls over the internet. A proposal called a green paper is published, which presents the government's ideas for future policy. This is open for public discussion, with interested groups like internet service providers and others likely to be affected. Once findings are gathered, a white paper is published, which outlines a firmer plan for government policy. Cabinet ministers must agree whether the proposal is taken forward. Once agreed, a bill is drawn up, and the minister responsible for the policy introduces the bill to Parliament for debate. MPs and members of the House of Lords comment on, debate, or amend the bill through several stages, and at the end of the process, apart from very rare circumstances, it must be agreed by both houses. It's then passed to the monarch, who gives formal approval, or royal assent, and the bill becomes law, called an Act of Parliament. In the UK, we live in a democracy, which means power is in the hands of the people through our right to vote. Throughout history, lots of people in the UK have campaigned for the voting rights we have today. There are lots of different types of elections to vote in: general, local, European. Let's take a closer look at how MPs are elected to the House of Commons through the general election. General elections take place in the UK usually once every 5 years, and every seat is up for grabs. On polling day, voters make a choice from a list of candidates. The candidate with the most votes then becomes that constituency's MP. Okay, but how would I know who to vote for? Before elections, candidates need to campaign to get people to vote for them. Campaigning can involve handing out political leaflets, speaking in public debates, talking to people during door-to-door visits, and party political broadcasts. Parties standing for election publish a declaration of their policies during the campaign, called a manifesto. Once elected, an MP represents all their constituents, even the ones that didn't vote or voted for a different candidate. The party with the most MPs elected forms the government, and their leader becomes Prime Minister. And if there's a hung parliament, where there's no clear winner, then a minority government or a coalition government may be created, or a fresh election held. One way to have a say in how the country is run is to use your vote. You have to be 18 or over to vote in general elections, but you can register from the age of 16. There are lots of other ways to get involved and have your voice heard, whatever your age. Remember, MPs represent all of their constituents. But how? You can visit an MP in their local constituency office, or you